Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, everyone, and welcome again to the Muslim Woman Wellness Podcast, where we focus on the dynamics of the modern Muslim woman. This is a space created by women and for women to support you wherever you are on your wellness journey. I'm Danielle.
And I'm Farah, and we're your host, two sisters in fate, navigating life, identity, and purpose in a world that often misunderstands who we are. Every Thursday at 12 p.m., we come together to support, uplift, and inspire each other to live empowered and fulfilled lives.
We are so grateful for your presence and excited to grow together and to build a community that reflects the beauty and the complexity of who we are.
So grab your tea, take a breath, and let's begin. Bismillah. So today's topic will be exploring confidence. And last episode we discussed identity and kind of like building on that topic and exploring it further. And another layer to that is exploring confidence and all the layers confidence means and has to offer. Today we'll explore what true confidence looks like, how it is influenced by identity, religion, and social perception, and how Muslim women can build a sense of self that is both authentic and resilient. We're going to dive into the unique challenges and strengths that shape confidence and discuss practical ways to embrace it fully in everyday life. So, to get started on that, to dig a little deeper, we also want to know and ask you guys, what do you think about when you think about confidence?
Yep, so you guys can comment and below the video and let us know what brings you here today. What areas of your life do you feel you need more confidence?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so excited to have this discussion today. I feel like it's such an important one, and it's also a conversation where I think we're going to draw out a lot of misconceptions that are very common around the confidence, the concept of having confidence. So, Farah, I know you're going to kick us off with a really interesting discussion. So let's get started with that while we look at the comments.
Yes, sounds good. So we can't wait for those comments to come in. We'd love to see your thoughts. But as we're thinking about confidence and trying to reflect on our thoughts, I would love to introduce the minority mindset and how this relates to the confidence and what this says about confidence. Maybe you might have heard about this. I'd love to also know in the comments if you've heard about minority mindset and your thoughts on that. But minority mindset, have you ever been the only Muslim woman or the only woman in a room? Have you ever felt like you're the only person because of the, your identity as a Muslim woman or your identity as a woman? And I'm sure Danielle and I, I'm sure, both of us have felt that way. I definitely have felt that way in some situations. And when we think about this is minority mindset. This minority mindset goes beyond numbers. It's a state of mind that develops when we feel different, unseen, or outside the mainstream, outside the societal norm. For many Muslim women, especially in non-Muslim societies, this mindset can take root quietly, and it can show up in different ways. It can show up as doubting your abilities because you feel you have to prove yourself. It can show up in feeling pressure to blend in or downplay your identity. It can show up as worrying that your voice, your hijab, or your values makes you stand out too much. So when you have that feeling of being the only like Muslim woman or only woman in the room, it's because you're feeling like you're standing out too much. Your identity is becoming in the forefront, and you're like hyper fixating on that because you feel that minority mindset. You're feeling it in that moment. And this often grows from external experiences such as stereotypes, lack of representation, or any subtle exclusion you may be feeling. And these internalized feelings of being less than because you're part of a smaller group. So this is where it stems from, external experiences and internalized feelings. But while this minority mindset can create self-doubt or hesitation, it can also be transformed. And, this is what Danielle and I will be speaking about a little bit, later into the episode. But, for now, we really want to focus on understanding where this is, where this is coming from. And, one thing I want to also mention, to add on to this minority mindset, is there's been a few studies done about this. There's been a few studies that talk about this minority mindset, and there's been a few like researchers that have been trying to understand where this comes from and where this mindset is coming from, because the goal is for us to overcome this mindset. So all this research is being done to really understand the depths of it and where it's coming from. So there was a study done by Yakin Institute, where they did a study involving 30 American Muslim youth, which involved like 19 girls, 11 boys, around the ages of 16 to 20, and 15 of the girls were hijab, and they were all from diverse backgrounds. Um, in the same, one of the some of the Muslim women, the teenagers, they reflected, and they mentioned as they got older that Muslim teenagers who choose to wear hijab found themselves in this complex world of modern Islamic fashion. So Danielle, I feel like this is something that we see all the time. This modern Islamic fashion, and it's so interesting. I'm sure, like in your community, also at JSMC, you may be discussing with the young girls there. They talk about modern Islamic fashion a lot.
For sure, but I think it's really interesting because, we have the I think the point here, and what I thought was really interesting when I was reading that study and the comments by the
Mm-hmm.
participants, right, was that they're navigating so many different pressures. So we have that experience, like you mentioned, where you're the only one in the room. You feel completely different. You're wondering, what is everyone thinking about me? What did they watch on the news yesterday that described me? What kind of stereotypes have they been raised with? And then
Yeah.
you have this other pressure coming, when you're in the Muslim community, to kind of live up to a certain
Yeah.
standard of religiosity, and you feel like you're being judged, on that sense. And then they have additional, like, especially for the younger girls, they have, they need to be fashionable and upholding certain standards there, the choice
Exactly.
to wear makeup or wear certain types of clothes. It's a lot of pressure, and that's really what came out in that study, is that they're living in such a complex world, right? And they're
Mm-hmm.
navigating these pressures from all different directions, and that really, really impacts their confidence and how they feel in various situations. Because even, if they're upholding the highest standard in their Muslim community, now when you put them in the majority non-Muslim society, the pressure
Mm-hmm.
is a completely different type of pressure. So they may have felt really confident amongst Muslims, like, okay, I'm doing my best. I'm doing what I should be doing. No one's going to be judging me. I'm wearing my clothes properly. And then when they head
Yes.
out into the non-Muslim area, they may feel even more judged as regards to what those people are thinking about them.
Exactly. And in the study itself, there was one sister that was around age 17. She mentioned that every time she puts on her hijab, she feels like she has to wear it in a way that tells Americans, I'm not some oppressed, like, Saudi girl. Because a lot of this is, where this was her words, that she feels like, in society, that if you wear hijab a certain way, then Americans will feel like you're oppressed, because they think countries like Saudi Arabia or other Middle Eastern countries are oppressing Muslim women, based on the way they dressed and the conservatism they have and the modesty they have. So they feel like, putting it, wearing it a certain way feels like they're oppressed, and they also feel like, it might tell the aunties in the masjid that I'm still a good Muslim, while telling other Muslim girls that I'm still prettier and cooler than the rest of you. So they feel like, when they put on their hijab, they have so many different mixed feelings, that they're worried that they might be called oppressed. They're thinking of, they're hoping that this tells the aunties in the masjid that they're a good Muslim, but it also shows other Muslim girls that they're still pretty and cool. So it's like so many different, like, thoughts are going on in their head just by putting on the hijab. And another a sister in the study, around 16 years old, who doesn't wear hijab, she said that, I feel like I'm never Muslim enough anyway, so why even bother trying fitting in with the masjid? But at the same time, when I have to pray around my non-Muslim friends, I find myself not wanting to, because I don't want to remind them that I'm different. So, there's like these dual identities, these complex differences and internalized Islamophobia that is coming out in so many different ways that is really affecting these young sisters and even older sisters when they put on the hijab or when they don't wear the hijab. They're, either or, they're still finding themselves trying to prove their Americanness, but while also proving their Islamicness and, trying to meet both kind of like approvals on one side, the society, on one side, the Muslims in the masjid, Muslim their family members, other Muslim girls in their circle, and it's exhausting. It could be exhausting for them, and I'm sure maybe some of the audience here can relate to that.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing I found really interesting in that study as well was that what was more impactful on Muslim women's sense of identity and whether or not they had the urge to kind of shrink and feel small was actually, it wasn't about, the way people think of Muslims as being potentially violent or dangerous. It was actually around the oppression of women. So when it comes to, when we're out in the world, right, we know it's very common for people to think, associate Islam with terrorism and stuff like that. And that may impact how you show up and your confidence in the world. But what was even more important was actually this concept of women being oppressed. So women tend not to internalize that idea that Islam is violent. It's like they know well enough that it's not a promoter of violence. It's not what causes terrorism. Like we're so confident in that. So then when people say that, we don't really internalize that concept. So that is less impactful than the concept of women being oppressed. Because when other people who are not Muslim suggest or believe or talk about or attack based on the idea that Muslim women are oppressed, the problem is that Muslim women actually internalize that concept, and they actually believe it themselves as well. And so when that study described, being in a room and asking the people in the room, does Islam, are Muslim women oppressed? A lot of the Muslims actually agreed with that. When they asked, are men, superior to women? A lot of them agreed with that. And when they were asked, like, are women equal to men? Almost no one raised their hand. So there is this like internalized concept that you're less than as a woman, right? So that's huge when it comes to this concept of minority mindset, because that means that you're feeling it not just in the larger society, but even in your own space, in your own, Muslim community, where you would think that you would feel a lot more, welcomed and empowered, right? So that's another issue that's another layer of what is kind of eating away at the confidence of women.
Exactly. And it shows up in so many different spaces. It shows up in Muslim young women, older women in their professional field, in schools, in the masjids with other sisters and aunties, and in the masjid, in their own family. And it is showing up in so many different spaces. And understanding the root cause will really empower and develop that confidence to a deeper level. So we definitely will explore that further. And I also do want to mention a story, one of my friends, that, when I was thinking about minority mindset and thinking about the study, it made me connect back to what my friend had shared with me about her story of minority mindset. And she's a niqabi and she works in a hospital, and she had mentioned that in the beginning, as a niqabi working in a hospital with predominantly white men and predominantly men in general, there was not many Muslim women there, or women. It was mostly like men, and just showing up as a niqabi in that space, there was so much internalized Islamophobia happening almost every day in the beginning. And this really relates to what the women were feeling in the study, because as a niqabi in a hospital and having to show up every day and do your work, and she's a researcher, so doing your research and being part of these clinical trials, that all, you need teamwork for that. You need cooperation, you need support. It's not just like an individual thing. It's something you need to work as a team. But it was difficult for her to work as a team when she felt this internalized Islamophobia, and she felt like herself shrinking a little bit, because she was the only one in the room that looked different, and she was really internalizing it so much at a point where she felt like she was not good enough, or she did not belong there, and or she didn't want to work anymore because she felt like as a niqabi she can't show up in these spaces and she can't be in these spaces, and that was really affecting her. And it was so disheartening and so hard to hear that story, because she's such a powerful woman individually, and to hear that just how she felt in the beginning of her work, doing such important work, was very interesting and very disheartening and very reflective of so many other women. So yeah, so this is how it started off, and I will let you guys know how it ends and how it is right now a little later into the episode.
Inshallah. I just wanted to add to this discussion, because for myself, I kind of am like a bridge between the two different societies in a way, like the Muslim community and the non-Muslim community, because for 22 years of my life, I was not Muslim. And, I as I moved into the Muslim community, and especially when I started wearing hijab, I got to kind of experience that difference in different ways.
Yeah.
And, I did go through a period of time where I felt very uncomfortable. Like when I first wore hijab, I mean, the first day I wore it to work, I planned this for weeks. I, bought hijabs. I felt so nervous about it. I would try them on in my house, but then I would, leave it there and go out. And the first day I decided to wear it to work, I actually beelined from the front door straight into the break room just to have a moment to myself. I was so afraid to greet my coworkers and be seen, in this different way. And especially because prior to being Muslim, I didn't have a favorable view of Muslims or religions in general. And so I kind of could imagine what might be going through some people's heads, right? Like how I might be perceived. And so it was really difficult. And so in many cases, I've kind of fluctuated between, feeling that desire to sort of shrink and put myself under that scrutiny that maybe I would have scrutinized someone with before. And, but at the same time, I also have been able to have a lot more confidence in some ways, because I know that I made this choice. I know why I made this choice, right? And I've also been a part of the rest of the society in a way. So I think sometimes it may not be as difficult for me, but I feel like there's a lot to learn from my experience as well. And so I want to get into the concept of confidence in general, because it is so important. We might be underestimating how important confidence is. Before I jump into this, because I want to talk about what makes confidence so critical and crucial for us as we navigate our lives through the world, I want to check in with the audience. So where do you guys feel like you are on the scale of confidence? Do you feel like you're a 10, completely confident wherever I go? I feel empowered. I feel comfortable in my own skin. I'm not afraid to speak up for myself, to advocate for myself, to ask for what I need. If someone's in my way, I'm not afraid to say, excuse me, Where are you at? So if you want to put in the comments on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you? I'd love to see that. But let's talk about, why is confidence important? Okay, so there's actually a study going all the way back to 1981. They used videos of random people walking in New York City, and they did this to assess potential vulnerability. They asked inmates in jail that were convicted of assault, and they asked them to identify vulnerable individuals, in other words, potential victims, based on their non-verbal cues. So they looked at things like gait, posture, and the pace of their walking. And it turned out that they all identified similar people as vulnerable targets. And those were people who walked with less fluid movements, shorter strides, less coordinated body motions. Essentially, people who appeared less confident and less attentive were identified as potential targets. And in 2024, there was a meta-analysis that revealed that high self-esteem is correlated with a reduced likelihood of becoming a victim of crime. So these things are really intertwined, right? So the way that we move through the world, whether or not we have confidence, it actually impacts whether or not we are a victim of the, microaggressions, of attacks, of the comments, right? that we've been talking about, that kind of people are fearing. So in other words, when you're in the world and you're afraid that you're going to be seen in a certain way, and that causes you to kind of shrink and try to almost disappear, right? Think about how that feels when you're thinking, oh my God, everybody is thinking, I'm oppressed. They're thinking that, my parents made me wear this. My husband made me wear this. I was forced to get married. I'm likely a terrorist. When those are the thoughts going through your mind, what does that do to your body? How does that cause you to walk if you're going to walk from your car to the store, right? It's going to be completely different than when you feel truly confident about yourself. And these studies show that that is very true, because if you're walking tall, right, with a smooth gait, with wide steps, if you're looking around, right, you're not afraid to make eye contact, that suggests that you are not vulnerable. You are not a target, right? And criminals will not single you out. Now, another study found that criminals, especially psychopaths, they are particularly skilled at identifying vulnerable individuals through their movement and the way that they speak, right? So they are sensing whether or not you are weak, right? If you're somebody that they believe they can control, intimidate, or overpower without resistance, or if you're somebody who you're pretty confident in yourself, you're grounded, and you would not be a good target, right? Because you're going to put up some resistance. And I'm just looking at the comments here. I'm seeing people saying they're 8.5, 9. So I'm seeing a lot of confidence, and then some people sort of in the middle at number 5. Yeah. So
and I like how Keisha mentioned that it depends on where I am. Because
totally.
That is so relevant, and that is so important for us to note that sometimes it could be situational, but we want to address that and understand why certain situations lead to certain confidence levels and how we can address that and find a solution for that.
Yeah, and that makes total sense. It goes back to what we talked about with the minority mindset, right? Like if you're if you're wearing, let's say, niqab, which is the face covering, right? Let's say you're wearing all black and you're covering your face. I just saw a woman walking down the street like this in my neighborhood recently. If that's how you are, and now you're in a non-Muslim environment, right?
Right.
And in the South, your confidence may be at a certain level, right?
Exactly.
But if you're in the masjid with a bunch of other women, studying Quran, your confidence is going to be in a completely different level. That's where people are probably going to likely get to know who you are, get to know you as a person and understand you and appreciate you for who you are. So it's definitely situational as well.
100%. And to add on to your study, something that is also really interesting is, when you explore the study further and you look at the criminals and the psychopaths that are doing this, they themselves have low confidence. And, that is why they're attracted to the ones that that move a certain way or talk a certain way, because they know what low confidence looks like, because that is who they are, and that is the essence of their being. So when they see others reflecting that, they know it's going to be easier to point out, and it's going to be easier for them to target and intimidate and overpower and control. So it's so important for us to understand all of that and understand the mindset of what low confidence can lead to, and how it can manifest into different things.
I love that, because I think that's confidence boosting by itself. If you think of people who would take advantage of you, who would, yell some kind of racial slur at you, make comments or microaggressions towards you as being sort of lacking confidence themselves, right? Then that's actually really empowering. It's like, do I want to subject myself to somebody who doesn't even think highly of themselves? Why am I putting myself below them?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So another interesting point, we want to get in now. We titled this the confidence code. So we're going to give you a really simple code, actually. But before we, do that, I want to talk about, some of the kind of misunderstandings about confidence, because we are sold information about confidence at a very high level. The self-help industry is worth over $13 billion, right? Wow. And it's definitely, because we're convinced that confidence is something that we lack. It's something that maybe you're born with. You either have it or you don't have it. It's something really mysterious. It's something you need to buy, something that has to get fixed, something you got to work on, right? And this applies especially to women for all of the reasons that we've been, describing. So 75% of the buyers in this industry are women. And so now we want to understand, what is confidence? How do you build confidence? How do you is it just a matter of, putting your head up high and walking with a certain gait when you leave the house? or is there more to it? So neuroscience has studied this at length, and there's a researcher named Ian Robertson, and he defines confidence as the belief that one can take action to create a desired future. So it starts with your belief, right? So everything really emanates, your feelings and your actions emanate from your beliefs, and then the thoughts that your beliefs produce, and then the feelings that your thoughts produce. All right. So if you have this concept that you can take action, if I believe I can take action, that is by itself going to start to produce confidence in me, because it activates your brain's dopamine system. So dopamine is really easy to understand when you think about it in terms of, like, if, let's say you lived thousands of years ago, and you're walking through the woods looking for food and water, and let's say you get a whiff of a stream, so you kind of smell water in the air. It means that you're on the right track, right? Your brain is going to release dopamine, and that gives you the sense, I'm on the right track, like I'm doing something right, keep going. It's kind of a motivator towards something, and it'll boost your mood. It can reduce anxiety, increase your mental sharpness. And when it comes to conversation, it can improve your persuasiveness. All of these things actually make success more likely. So that little bit of dopamine that gets released in the brain when you either think I can take action, you have that belief, or you do something that tells you you're on the right track, the release of dopamine will actually make it more likely that you will achieve the results you're trying to achieve. So confidence is actually the belief that you can do something. And the brain treats this as if it's already happened. So when you think to yourself, so maybe think of something right now in your life that you want to do, but maybe you lack confidence about it. If you want to share with us in the chat what that might be, if you have a specific thing, I'd love to see those comments. So think about what that thing is. Like, okay, I want to take this action, but I don't really feel confident about it. Maybe you're procrastinating, maybe you're overthinking it. What is that thing? So think about it. Now, if you adopted that belief that I can take action on this, I am capable of doing it, your brain is going to treat that as if it's already happened. So your brain will believe, yeah, sure, we can do this. Instead of wondering, I don't know, can I do it? Maybe it's too hard. Maybe I don't have the skills. Maybe I'm not good enough, right? If you think, yeah, I can do this, the brain is going to be like, okay, yeah, we can do this, right? It's going to release that dopamine, increasing your motivation and lowering your anxiety around taking that action. And then that creates a positive cycle. So when you believe you can achieve something, you're more likely to act, right? And I'm sure you guys can feel that right now. Like, if you think, oh, I don't know, I'm not sure if I can do this, how likely are you to actually take action on it, right? That likelihood goes down. So that decreases your chance of success. And so it could either be like a self-fulfilling prophecy of I can't, or, you can boost your confidence starting with that belief that it's possible, and then eventually taking action, right? Because that belief is going to lead to okay, let me try, right? And then when you try, that is now proof, right? It's like casting a vote for yourself. So it's I want to accomplish something. I'm going to take some action. And you take action, you cast a vote for yourself. Your brain is okay, yeah, we did something. We took action, right? That itself boosts your confidence. So I love, my mentor always says that confidence is not a prerequisite, it's a result, right? So we often think that we want to have confidence before we take action, but really the confidence is a result of taking action. So we want to have a belief that something is possible, right? Then we take action on it, even if it's a small action, and that is proving to ourselves that we can take action, that we're action takers. And then that is what boosts the confidence. And then when you have confidence, you're more likely to take action again, right? And to keep going.
Yeah,
so,
I love that.
Yeah, and it's pretty simple, right?
Yeah, that's the code. And it's as simple as as getting dopamine. Like, as you mentioned, the effects of dopamine, and if you think about dopamine, we do that every day. When you wake up and you have that first sip of coffee, that first sip of tea, or if you listen to something, if you watch a movie or a show that you really enjoy, those are all actionable items that you're doing every day that is giving you that dopamine. So as Danielle mentioned, confidence is something you take action in, is something that you act towards, and you see the results of it when you act towards it. So if every day you do something as simple as drink coffee to make yourself happy or give yourself that dopamine, every day you can do something that makes you connect with others. These are all things that give you dopamine when you connect with others, when you drink or eat something that you love and enjoy, when you listen to something you enjoy or watch something you enjoy or you learn something new. Those are all things you do every day that comes so easy and it's so simple. And that's the same thing with confidence. It could be that simple when you follow the code Danielle just mentioned.
So it's interesting because on the converse side, right? If you say to yourself, I am going to get up and pray tahajjud tomorrow, right? Mm-hmm. Or I'm going to make a bunch of phone calls, for my business, looking for clients. Or I am going to, I'm going to start studying. I'm going to take a class. I'm going to learn Quran. I'm going to memorize Quran. You say those things to yourself, but then tomorrow comes and you don't take action, right? Or maybe you do it once, but then the next day you don't take action, right? These are things that also deplete confidence, right? You're not able to trust yourself. So you want to build trust with yourself. So if you guys think of something really important to you right now that you want to accomplish, an action that you really want to take that maybe you've been hesitating on, maybe you don't feel confident about, right? Look for something even small that you can do to start building that self-trust, right? Action that you can take where it's like casting a vote every day. I am taking action again and again and again and being consistent. And, we have in Islam, alhamdulillah, the hadith about that Allah loves actions that are consistent, even if they're small, right? And that applies across the board. So whatever it is that you want to work towards, as long as you can take a small action and sort of prove to yourself that you're capable of it, it's going to make a difference. And over time, you can start to build that up, which is only going to increase your confidence, inshallah. So we have here a kind of demonstration, a visual demonstration. So we can put that up right now about the Western mindset versus the Islamic mindset. So I want to go into, this is the real confidence code, okay? And this is tawakkul. It's relying and trusting in Allah. So, what I just described is beautiful and it's great. And that's what science is telling us, right? But Islam takes it to a whole nother level, a much deeper level, because, Western science is kind of saying, okay, believe in yourself, believe that you're capable, believe that something's possible. And that will kind of give you the wherewithal to take action. And that action is going to lead to that confidence. And then the success, right? When you actually achieve something, that's when you know that you're worthy, right? But in Islam, the deeper level is that we don't have to just trust and rely on ourselves and our abilities and our skills, right? We believe and we rely and we trust in Allah, right? Who is capable of all things. That is a whole nother level. And when it comes to that, neuroscience is telling us the same thing, that confidence doesn't come from just, thinking about something, but it comes from taking action. So when we say, like the hadith says, tie your camel and then trust in Allah, right? You have to take some kind of action. You have to take an action. You don't say, feel confident about your camel tying skills and then tie it, or just think about your camel being safe and tied and then it's going to happen. You have to actually do the work and make the effort, and do it to the best of your ability as well. But then you release the outcome to Allah. So the real difference between these two models is that success is not in the outcome itself, but it is actually in the effort. It is in actually taking action. That's what builds confidence, that confidence circle that we just talked about. And that itself is success. So if you feel successful because you took action, right? How much more accessible is that than waiting for, winning the marathon, getting the promotion, accomplishing whatever task it is, and waiting till then to feel like you were successful and building confidence from there. So you can build your confidence just from, putting in that effort. That's really all you need. And then you trust and rely on Allah for the outcome.
Yeah, exactly. And that is so beautiful. And I think it releases such a burden off our shoulders when we think of tawakkul. And when we realize that tawakkul is our code for confidence. And, tawakkul is so beautiful because there's so many studies on tawakkul and how psychologically, scientifically, Islamically, it's so beneficial, so beneficial for us. And when we think of tawakkul in a way of like reframing our mind, it can really empower us to work towards confidence and increasing our confidence levels. For example, like when we reframe our minds, and this is something that's used in like therapy and CBT, the concept of reframing your mind for a healthier, happier mindset. And this is the same thing as having confidence mindset. So when you reframe your mind, you think of like, instead of you looking at challenges as a setback, or looking at something negative that happened in your life as a setback, or failure, we can look at it as, this is Allah's plan. This is something that you tried, you put in effort, you acted with sincerity, you trusted Allah, and you tried your best. And that itself is success, as the code mentions, like the Islamic mindset. Effort itself is success. So when you think about reframe your mind in that way, and reframing anything negative that happens, any challenges that happens, instead of thinking it's a setback, reframe it and tell yourself and that you had tawakkul, that you made tawakkul, you acted with sincerity, and that effort itself was success. And then you try again, and you keep going through this code. You keep repeating it until you develop more confidence, and until you feel more accomplished. And this takes time, as Danielle mentioned. You have to tie your camel and trust in Allah. So it takes time. The work takes time, and the outcome takes time.
I think the beautiful thing about it is that it's not relying on your own ability, right? Because why do people kind of self doubt themselves? Why do they second guess themselves? They are wondering, like, am I actually capable of this? Do I have enough skills? Do I know enough? Am I worthy enough? Right? But when you're leaving it in Allah's hands, you're believing that the one who has power over all things, the one who is the best of planners, and you're leaving it to Him and His execution of it. Then it's not about whether or not you are, good enough or capable enough. Your connection with Allah is really the key, so that sincerity, that love, that devotion, and that reliance on Him alone is what will move you forward in life, right? And it doesn't really have anything to do with you other than that connection with your Creator. So I feel like that's so beautiful, and we'll get into a little bit later some of the tools that we can use to make this more concrete, inshallah. Because sometimes it's like a lot of people with tawakkul, they think that means that I can have trust and reliance on Allah to give me the outcome I want, right? And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck with it. And then when something doesn't turn out how they wanted it to, then they start to have a lot of doubts and anxiety around it. But really trusting and relying on Allah is about truly leaving it in His hands and knowing that His plan is the best, right? It doesn't mean that you're not going to struggle, that you're not going to experience, adverse events or sadness or grief, right? But you believe that regardless of what you're going through, whatever the outcomes are, it is for the best.
Exactly. And so as you mentioned, like it becomes difficult sometimes when there are challenges, there are setbacks, and you feel like you're doing something repetitively, and it's not working out, and you kind of get demotivated, your confidence levels decreases again, and it's like a vicious cycle. But putting your full trust into tawakkul, as Danielle mentioned, is taking actionable items in putting that effort in, and continue trying. You don't give up. You continue having that tawakkul. You continue acting with sincerity. You continue reframing your mind, so you turn challenges into something that Allah had planned for you, into a purpose. Once you have that purpose, it really becomes important. And I'd love to also get back to my story that I shared in the beginning about my friend who is a niqabi, and she works at the hospital. And how I mentioned in the beginning that she felt so much internalized Islamophobia. She had that minority mindset in the beginning, and it made her work very difficult. And she felt like such low confidence, and she was really debating what to do, if she should continue working there or being in that space. But, she had tawakkul. She had this code. She found this code. She discovered this code. She, implemented it for weeks, and she kept having tawakkul. She kept acting with sincerity. She kept doing it for one purpose, to please Allah, to give back to the community. She reminded herself that she's here because of a bigger purpose, because she's trusting in Allah, and because she's doing work that is pleasing to Allah. She is, helping Muslims. With her research, it also helps Muslims. Because it's research on medical information, on cancer information. So this is all, beneficial for the Muslim community as well. So knowing that purpose and knowing that reason, and also talking to other Muslim sisters that she trusted, and tying her camel, and then putting her trust in Allah. She did all of that for weeks, and just kept doing, kept trying, did not give up. And now now everyone respects her. All of the men that work there respect her so much that they put her in the forefront. So now she's doing outreach. They kind of let her represent the company, because they saw that, she was not given up in her identity, and she kept showing up. She kept showing up in that space. She kept making sure that she was doing her work, and she was excelling in her research field, and she kept perfecting it. And there was so much respect. They saw so much. They respected her so much out of that. And now she's doing outreach. She's going to different hospitals. She's going to different organizations, different community settings. And she is talking about the work that they're all doing, and representing the work that they're all doing. So it's just so beautiful when I think about that. And, seeing that tawakkul, that confidence code in action, just seeing all of that is so beautiful. So, yeah.
I love that story. I think that's really amazing. And it's definitely, an example that many of us, we're not even in that situation, right? And we feel so fearful. And it brings me to the concept, right? We wonder, like, do we have to have confidence before we act? But what about, hold on a second. Sorry about that.
Yeah, 100%. Like, when we're thinking about all this, like, what do we have to, we can have the code, but, we don't have to have everything figured out. It doesn't have to be perfect, and I think that is the misconception sometimes, that, everything, that it needs to be perfect. Like, we need to have perfection. Confidence does not equal perfection.
Yeah, well, I was going to say something else that completely flew out of my mind. But when it comes to perfectionism, that's something that I've seen so often pop up. And so I think it's really important that we address this as well. So in the chat, I'd love to hear from you guys as well. Do you think that do you have this perfectionist tendency? Is very, very common amongst women. And the idea, I think, with it is that if I can do it perfectly, like, I have to do it perfectly. Otherwise, I shouldn't do it at all. Right? Or this fear of doing something and it not being perfect, right? And so we are, we're hyper visible as Muslim women, oftentimes, especially if you're, wearing hijab, or imagine wearing a niqab as well, covering your face, in a predominantly non-Muslim environment. So when you feel like you're the only Muslim woman, you're not only representing yourself. So part of this perfectionism concept pops up when we feel that we're actually representing our entire faith community, right? And research shows that actually 78% of Muslim women in professional spaces feel that they are representing their entire faith community, that every action they take is a representation of Islam and Muslims. Now, that's a lot of pressure. So what if you feel pressured to show up perfectly every single day at work, that every word that comes out of your mouth, on up days, on down days, when you're having PMS, imagine, like, you're afraid to have any emotion. You're afraid to say the wrong word. You feel like you have to do the best you possibly can in your role. Like, women already have to work extra hard to sort of prove themselves in the workplace. But imagine if now you're also a Muslim woman. You're not just representing women. You're not having to show that, you're the best, you're perfect, you don't make any mistakes. But you're also showing that, Muslims are good people. Muslims are professional. Muslims are intelligent, right? All of that is riding on your shoulders. And this is what psychologists call socially prescribed perfectionism. The problem is that perfectionism is inversely correlated with confidence. So now, if you feel like you have to be perfect all the time, that is actually going to lead to that shrinking feeling, right?
Yeah.
That thing that makes you even more vulnerable. So the more you demand perfection before acting, the less you actually trust yourself to handle imperfection, right? Like, what happens if something goes wrong? How is that going to impact you when you believe that you have to be perfect? So you end up overthinking things, over preparing, and never feeling ready. So I'd like to know in the comments, like, how many of you have felt that before? That overthinking, over preparing, never feeling ready, never feeling it's good enough, or feeling like, when you've done something and you maybe feel good for 25 seconds, like, okay, I accomplished that, I got it done, before you start berating yourself about what you could have done better. I love it. I see
Yeah.
someone says not anymore. Yeah, it's a lot of people are becoming aware of this and realizing that perfectionism isn't is first of all, it's not attainable, right? But it's also
And
not
it's
productive.
exhausting,
It's
it can be
exhausting.
so exhausting and create such a weight on our shoulders that we don't need. We already have things going on in our family life, our work life, our personal life that, that we think about, that challenge us. So this should not be an extra level on us because it's not needed. It's been socially constructed. So once we remove those barriers, remove those, that weight from us, it opens up such a new world that is beautiful.
Yeah, and it's that cycle again. So there are these things that are so
Mm-hmm.
circular when we fall into these sort of traps around confidence, right? So if you have unrealistic expectations, which is perfectionism, setting a standard for yourself that is so high. And this isn't to say that having a high standard for yourself is bad. It's good to go after, to do your best, to try to be the best you can. But when you have a standard that is unattainable, and you're holding yourself to that in an unrealistic way, that leads to so much internal pressure, which
Yeah.
creates anxiety. And then as that thing nears this kind of stress is so damaging. This is another thing that I see all the time, like so much burnout from stress, right? And then you get
Yeah.
only temporary relief. So whatever you do accomplish, it just is so fleeting. And this, you can see this with people who are in the Olympics, right? When they are like so fixated on winning, when they win that
Yeah.
gold medal, right? They actually they're not happy afterwards. They have such a big crash afterwards because number one,
Mm-hmm.
they were working only for that specific outcome, right? And just because of all that stress and pressure on the actual outcome itself. And before, once they accomplish it, it's like, now what? Right? And then that
Mm-hmm.
just reinforces the negative beliefs, and the need to do even better in the future is strengthened.
Yeah, and actually, there's been some studies on perfectionists, and a lot of perfectionists have reported feeling isolated because when you're in this world, when you're in this perfectionist confidence trap and this cycle of perfectionism, it leads to isolation because you're in this constant cycle on your own. You put up these emotional walls. You have a high expectation of others because you're expecting others to be perfect around you also sometimes, just like you expect from yourself. There's fear of conflict. There's fear of disapproval. There is codependency. There's loneliness. So there's so many things going on, and these patterns, the cycle leads to isolation in the end, and it leads to being alone, even when you're not alone, even when you're in a room with other people, because you're constantly going through this cycle in your head. It leads to isolation. And that is something that can be so detrimental to our mental health, to our well-being, and it's something that we have to work towards getting out of and making sure that we're not part of this cycle.
For sure.
So I
So
definitely.
what about those what's it called, paradoxes, or the
Yeah. So, in addition to the cycle, some things that are part of this cycle is having these myths also about what confidence is. And, one of the myths, as Danielle mentioned earlier, is perfectionism. So, there's so many myths out there, especially about being perfect, how perfection leads to confidence. So I definitely would like to explore some of these myths, and let's see if we can, debunk them a little bit and work towards making sure that we know what confidence really is, and we're not like we don't fall into these traps of what society tells us confidence is. And so one myth is I must be perfect before I can feel confident. So, this myth, it seems hard to, it seems, sometimes it seems impossible. Like, you don't have to be perfect. Like, why are people saying this? But, believe it or not, there's so many people that believe this. There's so many people that believe I must be perfect before I can feel confident. So that is one of the myths. And, something that can be more helpful in with this mindset is, remind yourself that perfection is impossible. We have to remind ourselves that you will strive for excellence, not perfection. And think about what you would tell your child or what you would tell your friend. If your friend or your child or someone close to you, or your parents, elders, anyone around you, your loved ones, or a close friend, if they're telling you that I have to be perfect in this, like, why can't I be perfect in this? Why, like, they're always telling you, like, I have to be perfect. What will you tell them? Are you gonna say, yeah, you have to be perfect, like, you should be perfect? Are you gonna tell them that? Are you gonna say, no, it's okay, you tried your best, you've been trying your best? You don't have to be perfect. You just have to keep trying and put in that effort until you feel, until you feel satisfied. And that does not mean you have to be perfect. That just means that you have to get to a feeling of contentment and being okay with where you're at in that moment. So think about that, reflect on that. What are you telling your close friend? What are you telling your loved ones if they bring this up to you and say that they have to be perfect to do this task or achieve this task? So another myth is, when I'm confident, I won't feel afraid or nervous anymore. So, I would love to know in the comments, how many.
I love this one so much because it's a common misconception that if you're confident, you're not going to feel afraid. So people see others up on stage or doing these hard things and they think they don't feel nervous, right? Because they're actually doing it and taking that action. But the truth is that it's normal to feel nervous or to feel afraid. And the definition of courage is actually taking action even when you feel afraid. So it's not the absence of fear, but it's the ability to take action even if you're afraid. So a better mindset, more helpful one, is that feeling afraid or nervous is normal, and it's a normal reaction to taking a risk or trying something new. And it's a clue that you're doing something that really matters to you. And it's a clue also that you're being courageous. Another myth is that only achieving great things will bring me confidence, right? There's so much pressure on people these days to do something quote unquote great, to do something big, to do something incredible. And they feel like, if they don't, they're not good enough, and this is in part promoted by social media. We see all these, entrepreneurs, these self-made millionaires. And we think even just by posting or getting a lot of views or having a lot of followers, right, that we're supposed to kind of live up to that as well. But the truth is, you don't have to do something amazing, something great, something huge, something that, spans the world, in order to be confident or in order to make a, important and powerful contribution to the world. So I think this is incredibly important.
Yeah, and these are things that we have to remind ourselves that some of these things we have been told. We have been told to believe, we have been, told to follow, told to believe that this is what confidence is. And this is what makes us confident. And we have to remind ourselves that, these are myths. When you think of a myth, it's false. These are false things. These are things that have been told to us for cycles, for generations, and these are things we have to break out of in order to keep moving forward and to keep, and to make sure that we have that confidence and to not fall into this trap. So yeah, so these are, some myths. I would love to know in the comments if anyone has believed in this, or, and how do you feel now after, we kind of debunked these myths a bit.
Awesome. Yeah. So this is bringing us to, what is it like in real life, right? What is happening in our lives that is causing us to shrink? And it often comes from, other people, their comments, their misunderstandings. And so, my daughter, mashallah, she started wearing hijab in third grade. So she was in a charter school. She was actually
Mm,
the only Muslim in her class. And when she decided in third grade to put on hijab and start wearing, covering her hair, the kids were really, curious about it, but they were also kind of, put off by it. Like they didn't know what it meant, but they didn't really want to fully understand it. And so she actually experienced a lot of, unwanted comments at school. And people
yeah.
asked her, do you shower in that? And would make all sorts of comments about it, like saying it was like a diaper on her head and things like that. So in these kinds of scenarios, I just want to also share. I have another friend who she'll go to the pool with her children, and she wears like a full, they call it burkini, right? Like covered from head to toe, but you can swim in it. And every time she's at the pool, she gets these comments from people. People will actually come up to her and ask her why she's wearing that, but not in a curious way, kind of in a judgmental way. And she's very, very hurt by that, and she dreads going to the pool. Right? She knows
Mm,
it's gonna be some kind of drama that she's going to experience every time she goes to the pool. And so I want to talk about different ways of approaching these kinds of scenarios, right? So maybe you guys can think about something that's happened to you. If you've ever had an incident like that, an unwanted comment, something that made you feel, made you recoil, made you feel less confident in the world. If you can share it with us in the chat, we'd love to hear what those are. And let's talk about the different ways of looking at these things, right? And we can put up the table now for haya and internalized silencing, okay? Because there's two different ways to look at this. So when someone makes a comment like, do you have to wear that even in summer? Aren't you hot, right? Do you shower in that? If you have the tendency to stay quiet, right, we want to ask ourselves, am I staying quiet? Whatever your reaction or your response is, am I doing this because if I responded, it would violate my dignity, it would violate my boundaries, right? If so, then that is a powerful place to be. You are choosing that response, right, out of a grounded place. And if you're staying quiet because you've learned to make yourself small, right, or you feel attacked, you feel embarrassed, right, then that is that internalized silencing. So let's
mhm,
look at these different ones. They feel very, very different. So let's look at the internalized silencing first, right? So that's coming from a feeling of fear, right? This shrinking feeling, this feeling of need to kind of disappear, right? A feeling like you're not allowed to exist in that space in that way, right? Like I'm not allowed, I don't feel comfortable, like I'm allowed to look this way, like I'm allowed to speak this way, right? Imagine if you have an accent, right? Or you look different from the majority of the people around you in some way or another. You feel almost like not allowed to exist, right? And that causes you then to diminish your own voice. You don't speak up for yourself, you don't ask for what you want, and you won't maybe share your talents, right? And your the beauty that you have to share with the world. And then you start feeling small. You might even start feeling resentful towards others, resentful to the environment that you're in, right? And feeling kind of like you're a victim. Versus, right, it's the same exact scenario, but we can reframe it. If you're coming from a place of strength, right? Like, I know who I am. That's why the conversation on identity in the last episode is so important, right? Knowing who you are, what you believe in, what you stand for, and why you do what you do. Having a sense of who you are, knowing your identity, that is a place of strength. So if I'm, a Muslim woman and I wear hijab, or if I'm just from another country, right, and I have an accent, right? But I love my culture. I love who I am. I believe in myself. Just because people don't quite understand me or they don't like my accent, that doesn't diminish me in any way. That doesn't make me small. That doesn't make me less than. I know who I am, right? That is a place of strength. Then when you choose to have boundaries, like I am choosing not to respond to this woman asking me if I shower in that or if I'm hot, right? Or I'm choosing to have a conversation and I'm choosing to believe that this person is asking me because they genuinely don't know, right? And maybe they're genuinely curious and I have an opportunity here to share with them share something with them that may be beneficial with them, that may for them, that may open their eyes to something new, that may be interesting and exciting for them to learn about, right? So you can
Mm-hmm.
choose to have a conversation about it from that perspective. You can also choose to remain silent. Like, I'm not going to engage in an argument, or I'm not going to respond to someone who's being disrespectful. And when you're making that decision, because that those are your boundaries, like, you know where you stand, you know what you're willing to tolerate and what you're not willing to tolerate, then
Mm-hmm.
that protects your own dignity. And when you make that decision, right, you're going to feel so much more at peace. And so with my friend at the pool, I used to be confused when she would talk to me about how she just hated going to the pool because someone was going to make a comment about her swimsuit, because I felt like if someone asked me about my swimsuit, I might like to have that conversation with them and explain to them like how important hijab is and how wonderful it is, because I've been through the experience of like not wearing hijab and then wearing hijab. And so for me, I got so much benefit from it. There's so much that I learned. There's so many things that I felt like I could do in the world that I couldn't do before. It boosted my confidence so much. And so I love to have that conversation, right? But if you're feeling like, this person's judging me, it's so embarrassing, I'm being called out, she's asking these ridiculous questions, what do I say? And you feel almost forced to respond in a way, then that can be very, that can knock you out of confidence.
Yeah, and oftentimes these judgments are coming from a place of ignorance. Sometimes they don't even know, the beauty of Islam, or they don't even know what they're asking. They're just like, asking things that the media has shown them, things that, some people have not been exposed to, the beauty of Islam and the beauty of Muslims and the beauty of wearing a burkini to the pool and all the benefits of wearing a burkini to the pool or the beach. Sometimes they need that. They need that information because they honestly sometimes just don't know. And it's important for us to always be equipped with that knowledge and also be equipped with empowerment, so we know, why we're wearing that burkini. Why do we want to be modest? Why are we wearing the hijab? Why are we doing these things for Allah? And that way, when we feel confident in what we're doing, we're able to express that more to anyone that judges us or asks us from a place of ignorance and needs that information. And that can lead to them exploring Islam more. And when you look at revert stories, when you listen to a lot of revert stories, this is a lot of stories are like this, where they didn't know much about Muslims. Someone told them something about Islam, and they started exploring it further, and then they themselves turn to Islam. So when you explain what you're doing and why you're doing it, like for example, Danielle, your friend, like she had told them why they're wearing a bikini, why she dresses modest. That person may have been inspired to explore it further and try to understand more what modesty is and what haya is and why they're doing that, and could have led them to on a path of Islam or a path of realization and connection to Muslims.
True. And I also want to just emphasize that, we don't have to put ourselves in that position either. Like, it's perfectly
Yeah,
fine to have that boundary and say, I'm not going to engage in these kinds of conversations. I'm here to enjoy the pool with my kids. If that's
exactly.
your choice and that's your decision, the point is that you can feel confident in making that decision and having those boundaries, right? So it's really just about kind of knowing where you stand, knowing what you're willing to engage in and what you're not willing to engage in, and then being okay with that, right? So if you want to remain silent and not engage in that conversation, there's nothing wrong with that. And you don't have to feel small or less than as a result, right?
Hmm.
Because that's your decision.
Yeah,
So
knowing you have a choice is so powerful.
exactly, exactly. So interestingly, I want to share this because, we think about being different and how it can reduce confidence, but there's something called the visibility paradox, right? So that means that being different can actually increase your confidence. So there are studies that show that women who wear hijab report increased confidence because of their hijab, even though it makes them more visible to discrimination. The reason is that when you make your identity explicitly visible, you're removing the option to hide. So here's where the choice comes in. You can develop the self-advocacy skills, and you can learn how to defend yourself. You kind of have to, right? You're kind of put into the spotlight and you have to show up. So by doing that repeatedly, taking repeated action, even when it's hard, that builds competence, which builds confidence. So the very thing that makes you vulnerable can actually also make you stronger. And not because discrimination is good. It doesn't mean you want to invite, negativity, but because you're forced to develop muscles that you might not have needed otherwise, right? So you're stretching yourself a little bit and putting yourself in this uncomfortable situation, which is causing you to develop skills that you may not have developed otherwise, which is going to build confidence. So I just want to throw that out there because I feel like some people shy away from certain things. We're afraid to take certain actions because can I handle it? What will happen? What are people going to say? But actually, once you put yourself in that position, you're kind of forced to develop the skills necessary to handle it, inshallah.
Yeah, and it's so powerful to know that we can play a part in this, and that we can take actionable items to be part of this and have that choice. And something also that is interesting and kind of relates to the visibility paradox is the power stance. So, something that is, Danielle mentioned, instead of shrinking, you can do this, and, you can, to be more confident, to be more powerful. So that is very reflective of the power stance. So power stance is, it's also called the power pose, and it's based on the idea that our body language doesn't just communicate confidence, but it can actually create it. And this goes back to, the talk we had on confidence and how the brain can be rewired, and how when confidence connects to the science of our body, and it can rewire our brain in a more healthy way. So this concept of the power stance comes from social psychology and nonverbal behavior research. There was some early research done by Amy Cuddy and some colleagues at Harvard, but it's been done for years about the power stance and how this affects our confidence levels. So when we break it down and we think about what's happening psychologically and physiologically when someone adopts a power stance or a power pose, we could think about embodied cognition. So this means that our mind and body are connected. Our physical postures can influence our emotions, thoughts, and behaviors. So think about when you stand tall and you expand your posture, you take up more space, your feet are apart a little bit, your shoulders are back, your chin is up, your hands on your hips. And when you think about it, a lot of us have poor posture. I myself have really poor posture that I'm working on. And when you realize the connection to confidence, it's really interesting. So think about when you stand tall, your feet are apart, your hands on your hip, your chin up. Your body sends feedback to your brain that you are confident and in control. So this can momentarily shift your internal state to align with that posture and make you feel more confident, more assertive, more capable. So so when you think about, if in the past you've done this, if there's been any moment where you have had this, posture, where you stood tall, you had your shoulders back, your chin up, your hands on your hips, your feet apart, think about a time where you did this in the past and why you were doing it and what situation it was and how you felt in that moment, if you felt more confident. Because, when you have this posture, it really connects to your brain and tells your brain that you are confident, you're assertive, and you're capable. So it's so interesting when you think about that.
For sure. I love this concept because we actually have this in Islam, right? Like our prayer, right? When you're standing in prayer, in Salah, you're standing up tall, right? But humble at the same time. So there's a lot of confidence in the qiyam part of our prayer. And then when we're making sujood and we're bowing, again, it's a way of physically demonstrating our submission to God. And it's connecting, and it's happening inside the body as well. So we already have this in Islam as well, where the position of the body impacts the mind and vice versa.
Yeah, and it's so beautiful to think about how how Islam has given us the tools to be confident in our everyday movement, as you mentioned, our prayer movements and how we pray. When we pray, when we stand up, we want to be as firm as possible. We're not slouching, we're not our posture isn't bad. We're putting out our best self to Allah and making sure that we're pleasing to Him. So, the same way we can do that is the same way we can in our everyday lives, and when we're walking walking down the street, or when we're talking to someone in a meeting, or we're talking to, coworkers, or just anyone in general. If you're talking to anyone and you're in a space where you don't feel as confident, try shifting your posture and shifting your stance a little bit, so at least you can tell your brain you're confident, and this will lead to you feeling more confident and more assertive and more capable. And to add on to that, so when we think about when we think about this more, and we think about the confidence effect, it really can shift away from self-doubt towards self-affirmation, to a state of I belong here. Standing in a power pose for just 1 to 2 minutes can help you reframe that nervous energy as readiness. So sometimes you don't feel confident, you're nervous, you're in a situation, in a setting that you don't feel as confident. You have this little, you're a little nervous, you're not as strong, you don't feel as confident. So if we shift our power pose for just 1 to 2 minutes, we can reframe that nervous energy into a state of self-affirmation. So it goes from self-doubt, from nervousness, to a state of I'm capable, I'm ready, I belong here, and your presence is valuable in that moment because of your shift and because of your belief that you belong there. So just shifting your power pose just for 1 to 2 minutes can effectively reframe how you feel in that moment of low confidence. And also, to add on to that, so if we think about when we see others, like when we see others that are confident, think about how they look. Think about when you feel like, oh, this person's confident, like they look confident, or this you're at a lecture, or you're at a talk, or you're listening to someone give a speech, and you look at how they're talking, how they're moving, how how their behavior is. They have that power pose, they have that power stance, they have their shoulders back, their arms open, their feet are grounded, and they're projecting confidence. So the same way you're able to acknowledge and point out what confidence looks like is the same way you can implement it into how you are, and shift your body movement, and shift how you are standing, and how you project confidence. And it just takes a simple movement of the body, a simple posture fix, a simple foot movement, and putting your back more firm, and your shoulders back, and just fixing your posture a little bit can really go a long way in telling your body, telling your brain that you are confident, that you are assertive, that you are capable. And when this happens, then the way we carry ourselves also change. And the way you carry yourself shapes how you feel about yourself, how others perceive you, how you perform under pressure. The power stand works because it leverages the brain-body connection to transform internal feelings of vulnerability into outward confidence, and that back into genuine inner confidence. So for the power stance to work, you have to shift your body a little bit to become a more firm, more assertive, more fix your posture, fix your legs, your shoulders in 1 to 2 minutes. It just takes 1 to 2 minutes, and
This
then
reminds me of how, like, a basketball player, if they're going
yeah,
to take a free throw or something, they might bounce the ball 3 times before they do it,
right.
right? That anchoring kind of action. And so I think what you're describing is, learning how to anchor yourself before you take certain actions. So if there's something that makes you feel a bit nervous, you're worried about it, right? You can actually shift how you feel about that, how you go into that experience, by just shifting your body posture.
Exactly. And it's pretty beautiful how, the way we shift can affect how our body connects and our brain connects, and then that leads to outward confidence and then inner confidence. So our body is so connected, and we have to tap into that, and tap into understanding how our body works, how our brain works, and connecting it to ultimately having inner confidence.
Yeah, and I think if we want to bring it to the level of tawakkul, of having true trust and reliance on Allah, then we can add to that, right? We can add, like, let's say you have enough time, you can make wudu. That's a physical reset as well, right? You can
Yeah.
make 2 rak'ah, you can pray. And
Yeah.
that's a spiritual grounding, right? And reconnecting with Allah. Then you can make dua, call on Allah for help. And then you can, think about the action that you want to take, right? And release the outcome to Allah as well. And then this is the difference between, we're not building ego confidence. And I think that's where things can get really confusing when we're learning about confidence in general. Like it sounds like an ego thing, like, oh, I believe in myself. I'm so great. I'm capable of this. I'm capable of that. But when you're, building it instead on certainty in your creator, it's completely different. And you're still building those neural pathways, the neurons that fire together, wire together. So you're building and strengthening those connections in your brain that move you towards action, that move you towards results. And at the same time, it will become easier and easier to kind of leave the outcome to Allah and be satisfied with your ability to take action.
Yeah,
So
100%.
let's move on. There's something else really beautiful. Okay, so when it comes to, we talked about, how we don't have to be perfect. And so I wanted to offer you a philosophy called the B plus work philosophy. And that means that, your best is good enough, right? So just taking action and shifting the concept that, as long as I'm putting in the effort, right? As long as I'm doing my best, it doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm confident because I'm actually taking action. So I wanted to give you that idea of the B plus, right? So if you're always striving for an A plus, it's going to be really difficult. You're never going to take action. But if you're okay with a B plus, you're going to put good things out into the world, right? You're going to start taking action. And guess what? Your action is most likely going to be good enough and get good results. So that's number one. Number two is the difference between individual confidence and collective confidence. So again, with our current, world, social media, everyone seems to be doing something big, right? People are trying to get the most views, get the most likes. They're trying to, start a crazy business that disrupts the industry. And we often feel like we're falling short if we're not doing something really big, right? And we also looking back at ourselves, like, am I good enough? Like, we're comparing ourselves to people on social media as well. Like, look at what this person is doing. Why am I not doing as much as they're doing? And we start questioning ourselves and lacking that belief in ourselves and our individual capability. But Islam offers something very different as well, which is confidence in contribution. And so it's not about like, am I enough? It's about, what does my community need that I can offer? And from shifting from, can I do this? Like, am I enough? Do I have enough skills? Am I good enough? To, who needs this from me, right? And so when you look at it more in terms of service, instead of like, what can I do? Like, and how great am I? How good am I? To like, what can I do? How can I help? What does my community need? And you shift from into service, then it's not about your ego anymore, right? It's about how you can help. And that is so much lighter. And that can apply, it doesn't have to apply to your whole community. It can apply to your family. It can apply to your best friend, your children, your parents. What are you contributing to them? What do they need? How can you serve? And that will also build a lot of confidence as long as you value that action. And so that's what I'm inviting you guys to today, is to value your contribution and maybe focus less on your individual achievement. That, inshallah, can result in lower anxiety and higher resilience, because your worth is no longer tied to your performance. It's tied to your presence in the web of your relationships. So I believe that's a really beautiful element that we have in our religion, because there's so much related to, brotherhood and how we're treating one another, and how all of our deeds are really, they're seen by Allah and they're appreciated by Allah. So don't devalue your actions, even if they're not, reaching as far as someone else's, as far as you can see, right? But instead focus on them being really genuine for the right reasons, and with that effort that is for the sake of Allah in mind, right? Taking those actions for His sake and then leaving that outcome to Him. And you'll be surprised at how much confidence you will build in that way. So we want to leave you with something that you can take action on. And you can create a log, right? So if you're somebody who likes to journal, you might actually write this down, or you can just create a mental log. And next time you're the only one in a situation, you can take an action. You can actively look for eye contact with someone and make a smile and offer a genuine smile, or just take a small but mighty action. It could be just changing your posture, right? It could be being aware and walking, powerfully from the car to the store, something simple. And we want to give you 3 levels. So choose which one feels like the right one for you. So level 1 is starting just maybe a power stance log. It's like keeping track of the things that you do each day. Maybe your confidence anchor. So like if you say, I'm going to, stand up really tall before I walk into work, or before I, stand in line with all the other parents waiting for my kids, or whatever action you take that makes you feel uncomfortable, right? You choose to create an anchor and use that anchor, like standing tall, like making dua, like praying maybe before you leave the house, making istikhara before you have an important decision to make, right? The prayer where you ask for help in making decisions. And then the second level would be actively, connecting in a situation where you feel uncomfortable. So if you're the only one in the room, the only woman of color, the only woman wearing hijab, actively connecting with someone, asking someone about themselves, learning about them, starting a conversation, or just offering a smile. It's a micro action, but your brain is going to log that as like, I didn't hide, I engaged, right? And that's going to boost your confidence more and more every time you find yourself in a similar situation. So that's level 2. So level 1 is just kind of, internal. Level 2 is taking action on the outside. And then level 3 is thinking of one piece of B plus knowledge or skill that you have that you could use to help somebody. So instead of holding it in until it's perfect, it's actually offering it. And it could be in a text message or a post online. It could be through a conversation. And you're not waiting for it to be perfect, right? And I love, there's a hadith that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said in Sahih Bukhari, that convey from me even if it's only one sentence, right? So this shows us that if you share something beneficial, even if it's little, there's value in that, right? So it's about valuing sharing something beneficial versus waiting for it to be perfect, waiting until you have that, certification or degree in order to share something beneficial with somebody. So this is another way of, providing goodness in the world and then releasing the outcome.
Yeah, I love that. And, this is so exciting for us to have like actionable items to work towards. And, it's something we're all doing together. This collective way of doing this activity leads to what Danielle mentioned earlier about having collective confidence and kind of like, supporting each other in this. So it is something you can also share with your friends, share with your loved ones, just something we can all just do together. An activity as a way to bond together, to work on each other's confidence levels, to support each other in building this confidence. And we'd love for you to tag us when you do it and use hashtag tawakkul in action. So we'd love to see this. And we're also going to try this ourselves. None of us is doing this alone. We're building that collective confidence. We're supporting each other, we're making it easier for us to all build confidence together. And to follow that confidence code that we mentioned earlier. So hashtag tawakkul in action, and we'd love to see it you could add it to the YouTube comments, and we'd love to see it, and to just kind of recap this, everything that we've been discussing, and to remind us and to shift our mindset before we end off. I want to mention that the minority mindset as a Muslim woman let's reframe that. Let's break away from that minority mindset and reclaim it and reframe what it means. So when we think of minority mindset, we're going to reframe it, and instead of seeing ourselves as a minority trying to fit in, we're going to see ourselves as a leader with a message, as a woman of strength and a representative of faith. Instead of thinking we're behind, we're going to think we're guided. Instead of thinking we're excluded, we're going to think that of having a purpose, that we're set apart with purpose. Allah gave us a purpose. We're not excluded. Instead of thinking we're the other, we're going to think, we're part of a bigger story of resilience and mercy that Allah has given us. And if you think about the Quran and all the stories mentioned, it's stories of resilience and mercy. Our religion itself is a story of resilience and mercy. So think of, we're not the other. We're a part of a bigger story, part of a bigger purpose of resilience and mercy. And we're going to choose our actions and lifestyle not based on trends or public opinion, but on what pleases Allah. And we're going to stand out, but we're not going to stand out. Sometimes we will stand out, but we're going to stand firm, and that is okay. Number two, we're going to build inner strength through faith. So we're going to remember that Allah chose us to live our faith in this time and place, and was we were chosen here to be here at this time, and Allah has chosen us to live to be Muslim in this time and place, and we're going to use that for strength. We're going to draw strength from dua, from dhikr, from salah, from Quran, from tawakkul, and really embracing what tawakkul means. We're going to remind ourselves that confidence and faith is not arrogance. It's not being narcissistic. It's being grateful. So reminding ourselves that confidence can just mean great gratitude, because it's being thankful for what Allah has given us, being thankful for the skills that Allah has given us, the talent, the space we're in. Allah has given us all that. So instead of thinking it means something negative as like arrogance or narcissistic, think of it as being a form of gratitude and a form of resilience and a form of strength. And we're going to embrace modesty as empowerment, not limitation. We're going to think of it as a conscious declaration that our worth is defined by our faith and character, not by our appearance or our societal expectations. And number three, we're going to take up space gracefully. So we're going to speak up in meetings. We're going to share ideas. We're going to advocate for what's right without compromising our values. We're not going to shrink ourselves to make others comfortable. We're going to represent our faith with excellence and kindness. And, we're going to understand that every space we enter can be an opportunity to represent Islam with kindness, excellence, and authenticity. And we're not just in the minority. We're going to inspire through it because of it. We're going to use we're going to use our religion and be inspired by it, and show it with grace, and highlight it with grace. Number four, we're going to build a support network. As Danielle mentioned, our collective confidence is powerful, and it's something that we should really highlight and focus on. We're going to surround ourselves with like-minded Muslim women who uplift and inspire us. We're going to find mentors or community groups that reinforce our identity. We're gonna bring visibly Muslim. We're gonna remind ourselves that being visibly Muslim can bring challenges, misunderstandings, but also it can lead to beautiful things. And we're gonna make sure that we respond with patience and excellence, and know that Allah sees our struggle. He sees our challenges and the misunderstandings, our bias and pressure that is happening, and He knows that, and He will reward that. Because we're gonna create spaces, even small ones, where our faith and voice is celebrated. Number five, we're going to redefine what success means. We're going to remind ourselves that success isn't about fitting into mainstream expectations. It's about living in alignment with your purpose, values, and integrity. And we're going to remind ourselves that we're living with a clear purpose, to worship Allah and to serve others, and to have that tawakkul, and we're not going to chase validation or worldly definitions of success. And we're going to stay grounded in Islam, even when society sways, even when society is telling us not to. We're going to stay grounded. And we're going to see our difference as a gift, not a social burden. Being a Muslim is a gift. It's something that is so beautiful that we should see it as a gift and not as a weight. And lastly, we're going to lead by example. So every time you show kindness, speak the truth, or act with humility and confidence, you're breaking stereotypes and inspiring others. So remind yourself that when you show kindness and speak the truth. And we're going to teach the world that Muslim women are powerful, wise, and full of light. So I will leave you with this affirmation that I want you guys to all repeat and remind yourselves, and wake up in the morning telling yourselves that you are not defined by being in the minority. You are defined by your mission, your faith, and your strength. And Allah placed you here for a reason, and you will rise with grace.
Inshallah. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Feel free to leave your questions in the comments and let us know what you're interested in hearing about in the future as well. We're going to continue our talk on identity. Mm-hmm. And we'll see you next Thursday, inshallah.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.